story of addressing the legacy of discrimination that is replete throughout the entire play, as well as the struggle of the relationship between the father and son. I did not have the world's greatest relationship with my father. In fact, he died without me ever forgiving him for the pain he brought to my life. And it took me several years afterwards to address that. And I'm a father now, and I have challenges being a father. And so the story of fathers and sons, specifically black fathers and black sons, and the relationship they have, and the challenges they have, regardless of what the subject matter is, was one that I really I keyed into. And so it was an opportunity for me to really kind of address an aspect of the story that I thought was not really being told. All the other elements are there, and I didn't try to hide them, but that was the key for me. That was what kind of hit me.
Good. And you talk about fatherhood. One of the things I wrote down when I read it was a passing down of norms from generation to generation, which is really to me the story. I invite you guys to start to speak to that. The other thing I want to, as well, is I want us to take a moment that when you speak to that, because of what you do respectively, maybe how the elements of this story you speak to the communities that you guys now serve and work with. We'd love to hear that also. And that passing down from generation to generation. And please join in this conversation as as you play these characters. I look at he's discussing passing down generation to generation of the black family, and the passing down of generation to generation of the white family. So let's speak to either one of them. Can anyone sound out? What do you think those passing downs were distinctively? Right? There's something we can clearly see, but does anybody?
No, I wasn't going to say.
Well, certainly for just as to how to behave under certain circumstances, how to clearly identify, oh, this is the norm here, this is straight acting, or this is some other form of acting, right? One of my earliest messages, my dad said to me, I was playing with the G.I. Joe doll in the front yard. I wasn't playing, the kid next door was playing with the G.I. Joe doll. And I said to my dad, hey, can I have a G.I. Joe doll? He said, little boys don't play with dolls. Which set me thinking that, oh, there's something here about, playing with dolls. There are certain behaviors that, are permissible and there's that aren't. And it set me up to now identify, well, what's permissible and what ain't. So that I could get his love and belonging, right? And not get his, dismissiveness.
Listen, I found that this particular play was I found having greater dimension than some of the other performances that have had greater notoriety of recent history. So I actually my husband and I saw Ham Bone, I'm sorry, Fat Ham in New York a couple of weeks ago. Certainly, Strange Loop has had tremendous success, and each of those performances talked about toxic masculinity, the challenge of being gay and black and male in the Deep South, and those challenges, but it didn't really touch on historic racism and the history of racism within the community going back 400 years. This play, for me, really did go into there. So I was uncomfortable actually throughout the performance. Kudos to you guys for making me uncomfortable. So that takes great skill to do that. And so this performance, this production, actually for me has great relevance to society today. So from that standpoint, the fact that it took the intersection of racial hatred and the divide that really is consuming our society now, for me made this particularly relevant, and I think this is actually a really great representation of have been and what we struggle to continue. And it is ironic that, you know, what we're going through is nothing new. And it is just part 4, 5, 6, whatever you would like to describe it as.
Absolutely. And Terry, that's the playwright would be so happy because he said, I want you to be uncomfortable. He said that is happening.
Yeah, this is my second time seeing it. I was more uncomfortable the second time.
This is my first time seeing the show. I was asked to see it before I couldn't. I want to see this production again because there's some things that weaved through that I'd like to pay attention again. But when I submitted the work to the South, this story is very, this production is close to my household. My partner is a Southern man. My partner grew up in rural Mississippi, northeast rural Mississippi. My partner picked cotton to go to school and eat. His mother was just buried in January at 99 years old. She picked cotton. And even at the funeral where we buried her, as we memorialized her, some of the family members talked about when Chris and I picked cotton out in the field, and they say in a very joyous way. I'm only 58, my partner is 60. My partner picked cotton. So when I was listening to you and watching this performance, this is a story that lives within my household. My partner, who's going now, he's not here, he's a married family. He drove to Mississippi, took him a few hours, and he called me this morning to meet at him. His cousin James and his daughters drove down to bury another family member. I often go down there, and when I'm down in Mississippi, some of the stories that was written, some of the parts of the story that was written there, some of the performances just remind me of his life. He lived in a society that was not welcoming for gays and lesbians. His father, who I love, I call him Dad, reminded me of your character. I love Dad June, but he was a tall, dark, proud man who loved women, who had a gay boy and didn't know what to do with him. And thank God that my partner has grace because his father, you know, has a gay son. And so what that end scene just killed me because I thought of Dad June hugging my partner, Willie June. That's his name, Willie June. Willie Earl. Will Earl June. I appreciate this because, and I'll stop with this, when in my work we talk about equality, and it's pretty much a coastal description, missing out on many parts of America, primarily the Southern experience. And the majority of African Americans right now live in the South. They live in rural South. They're social conservatives. I'm only one generation from that experience. And so I was glad to see this story that talked about fatherhood, young romance, awkwardness, and I imagine it's because if you're in a small town, in this house, going to generation, in this house that you lived in and your mother lived in, it makes sense that this tradition stays alive because this is all you know. And so it shouldn't be foreign, it should be, this is just what it is. I'm just glad that this production recalled those memories, but there's a lot of Willie Jews, and I hope that a lot more people see this kind of production.
For sharing that, I agree with you. It hit home, it hit so many points for me, home, family, even covered our experience so much. My grandfather, he bought, you know, he got his 40 acres of land, he had his store, he had gas, he was only went a few back there with his gas station, all of that, he spoke across the board, you know. He reminded me of the fight I got in with the white boy at school, you know, what they're in school. And
My partner always talked about the house that his grandmother and grandfather built.
Yes.
That raised all of those 13, 14 kids.
Exactly.
And how important in your character talked about that house. That really resonated to me because again, with the words given, I heard legacy and some other things.
Yeah.
You know, this is a common black story.
Yeah.
It just happened to be a real story.
And I love these. Okay, we got a whole question. We're gonna do the last part. We're gonna do questions if you allow us to do that. The last thing before we switch over, because I want to switch over to Daddy character, well, but with the Z character. How did you ever consider how his character is carrying the weight of his family?
See, actually, that was a little difficult for me because
because, at least from the beginning, you know, it talks about it was dangerous to be held, it was dangerous to be kissed, it was dangerous to be squeezed tight, but then he switches and says, I need to be squeezed tight. And so the dynamic of knowing where I come from, the life that I've lived up until this point, and having to conform, and recognizing that I don't fit.
Right.
And so how that can wear away at somebody. That was what I really wanted to try to focus on in terms of the weight of everything. I just wanted to make sure that it didn't feel one-sided, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
If I may, my heart melted when you said I wanted to be held. Or, and be, what did you say, I need to be? I need to be held. When you said that, you sound like every young gay boy that I knew growing up. Because that's all we wanted. We just didn't know how to say it. There were no classrooms, there was nobody to guide us in that. Because I came out at 15. I wanted that too. And so you just brought up so many happy memories when you said that. It was very touching. So I appreciate that.
And being a young boy, it also reminds me, I'm paraphrasing the lines so somebody don't get it. It just, when I read the script before this, and this one I stuck out for me so well, it's about being young and not knowing what not to be in public. I'm just sharing that that's a line for me, and it clearly played out in your character, because you know, how do you hide when you don't know what it is you're not supposed to be? You know it hide when you took from your father, because you just can't show that, but it's just raw and inside of you. And I think you guys did a great job of expressing that, really. And forgive me because I don't have the script in front of me with all the names, but I want to talk a bit about Danny himself. Because equally, he is on the end of his family legacy, all that he has had to carry. I mean, I know he talks about it a lot, but how do you, as the actor, feel carrying that at this point in the family line?
Yeah, so I think particularly like I was struck by just the story being told through the idea of family makes it so much more real. Like saying, connecting with something when you say, oh, it happened 100 years ago, is a lot different than connecting with something when you say, oh, it's 2 or 3 fathers ago. I think then it becomes much more tangible, much easier to like understand that these things are not so far removed, as far removed as a lot of, you know, our education system and a lot of like propaganda will tell you. It's a lot closer. It's like for Danny, he's you know, 1 generation removed from intense racial violence, and so yeah, just like trying to be your like the challenge for me was playing. You want to play, or I wanted to play Danny. Danny wants to be different, but is not different. And you know, like you mentioned the things that are spoken, like don't play with, like boys don't play with dolls, but there's also like a lot of stuff that's unspoken, like the way that Danny's father, you know, even when he's joking, even when he's being loving, it's all physical, it's all violent, it's like wrestling, right? So it's like, even when you're not being told what to think, what to do, how to act, verbally, you're seeing it. He's like, oh, my dad handles everything from anger to happiness with physical violence. So like when he's confronted, when he reaches an opportunity where a crossroads where he doesn't have the answer, he doesn't know what to do, he resorts back to that violence, and I think that's something that is also important. I lost what the question was, but
well, you're doing fine.
Okay.
You're doing fine. It's interesting too, though, but it's something I haven't considered, that what you just said is that, except for those 2 realistic moments and one in the beginning, Danny's father, even though you say it's violence, he's tangible. He touches his son, but between the 2 of you, there's no physical contact.
Right, there's very little.
It's very
Other
little.
than the haircut.
Other than the haircut, right? Well, he has to make sure he's correct now. He has to make sure the hair is correct.
I've seen this play 3 times, and every time it breaks my heart. That haircut, my dad, the way he throw the the cape up and wrap it around him,
Yeah.
and you actually touch him.
Yeah.
And you touch him in a loving way. You know, and that's what I remember as a child. That's, other than beatings that my dad gave me, that was those moments that I had with my dad when he touched my hair and he looked at me and he saw me, I thought, at that time. So I thought that was so powerful. And I wanted to tell the playwright that, what was he thinking when he put that in there? Was that his experience too? You know, I don't have it here now, but I have it here.
So, can I just share the conversation that we were talking about? When I was talking to the playwright first, he said, well, no, this is the play that I wrote. And he told you, this is the play that I wrote. But then I put my dramaturg skills on and talked it into the front, then he breaks down and says, yes, this is my experience. You know, he admitted that, you know, all of these are elements of his life. And they were too real. And they're too relative. You know, you know, so many of us have been through that. So yeah, and I like to segue in his contact with his son, because he knows his son better than his son thinks he knows him. And I mean, we pick up the points, the white boys or whatever, but still, his actions are to protect him. Is that how you're feeling as well?
Yeah.
Yes and no?
It is a yes. It is a yes and no. It is to protect him. I think he's aware that his son is different. And
Okay.
that rather than him being different, he thinks he can bully it out of him.
No.
Right? He can bully it out of him, and that he can have experiences in the world that will show him he can't be that vulnerable and walk around that way because he's going to get hurt. Right?
If I may, I just want to address the production space. I love small theater personally, and I had the opportunity to be in the front row. Your skills at portraying the story of four of you just really. To be honest, I didn't understand a whole lot. That's why I need to see it again, because I know some things went over my head, particularly some of the things that you were doing. I mean, the point. What you're in Africa? Tell me that again. Jesse. What you were portraying, something's coming over my head because I thought, okay, that's who he's supposed to be. But what I got was an experience so close that you just couldn't even ignore because I didn't understand it. I was receiving something, and I want to again address you. I was really moved. You look basically like my best friend, and at his age, and so there was this kind of other thing that was happening as I was viewing you portraying this person who, at the end, identified as a person of the same gender, but it looked as though the whole production you were questioning and hiding. And so this small space just allows us not to walk away and escape. And I do appreciate Paul shares in that decision,
And the directing, yes.
Well, I definitely wanted to ask a question because I think it's very important. This gentleman portrayed whom I believe to be the subconscious. And there was a religious presence, so there was intersection of so many things here. And I kept hearing the phrase defy God. And there is a historical reference to slavery brought up. There's a historical reference to how slavery was justified. And so I think there's a subtext here, and I'm going to bring this up, that there's a subtext that that this was wrong, that happened with slavery. There's also a subtext that what's happened with homosexuality in the Bible is also wrong. So I saw multiple intersections of lenses, but that lens particularly stood out as a contemporary that has not been approached in modern day theater. So I think this was a brilliant, brilliant production. And this subconscious, I think, I hope there's a part 2, 3, 4, 5, but hopefully this goes into a film context. But that was so important, that intersection of those lenses.
Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that and forcing it in, because I actually specifically spoke to the playwright about that. And you're absolutely right. And he said he indicated that because it's written at a time where now we know that, as they say, God don't make no mistakes, as they say. But at that time, that was not. We didn't know that about ourselves. You know,
We're learning. I don't think
now.
we're learning. We're
Yeah,
discovering and
but
uncovering.
But during
Yeah.
this period, but at the period where they were right then, he felt that where they were in the deep south, and even just a few years ago, you know, that message doesn't get to us. So he's feeling everything is wrong. So especially in the letter, because where the letter was, that it was just not the thought. We're defying God, you know, we're defying God. So their love was so strong that it just had to be a defiance. It's not, this is how God created us to love, but it wasn't indeed a defiance. One quick thing I want to add into with Dad is that, and it's not even a question, but I didn't even get it in my pre-study for this until I saw you do it. And when your wife, the spirit of your wife, asks you, are you cooking? No, nobody needs to eat. And then when he felt that he got to that fight and he was a Mitchell man now, he says, I'm gonna go home and cook dinner. Right?
Keep the family together.
It
That was
speaks
the,
to
yeah.
so much right and maybe not right. But it's a powerful moment, and there's so much, you know, it came through. I don't even know if you intended that, but it absolutely came through when I saw that. One last question I got to ask. This is my question on this part. Now, I asked the playwright, but I don't care. I'm going to ask you this question. Why does he not, and anybody else, why does he not reveal the truth about Papa?
Wait a minute, your character.
I'll let you start because he asked, he reads the letter and everybody got that, right? You get, this is your letter, somebody wrote this to you. Right. And why does he do that?
Personally, I think it was kind of twofold at that point, because, you know, he starts off asking, don't make me ask, please don't make me ask. And so the question that he's really intending is, are you gay?
Right.
And, you know, we don't lie to each other. And so I have to be honest in that I know what he's asking, so I have to honestly answer that. But also, he's never had, he doesn't know Papa like I know Papa because of the letter. Right. And so bringing that up would, one, it could cause more problems, because now it's like, oh, I'm trying to put this off on his father or whatever, or it could change his entire view, and it could like completely shift his reality. And so it's like, I have to be honest in what he's asking, but also, how would knowing that his father was gay or bisexual, like men, how that would affect him and then his relationship with me?
That makes sense. So also ask Papa.
I'm sorry, what was the question
The
again?
whole question is that your secret is never revealed.
My secret is never revealed. I feel that was one of those things, and I'll be honest. Can I say? Okay. We literally tabled that whole entire letter thing, letters in the bag thing during Tech Week. And what I came up with was, personally for the character, because this is my second time playing this role. This was my house at one point in time until I died. However, that shed was my safe space in this story. And so I used to, I feel like Papa in that time frame, had all these letters, and he would read them, and he would take them dear to his heart, and he would stash them away. He was a married man. No, he doesn't want anybody to see this. So he stashes it away. And what I think honestly happens is, I feel that there's not enough time for him to discard these letters. I feel that, because
I don't know how he died, but you know, I'm assuming he just went. But I feel that there was something that was supposed to happen to where he was supposed to get these letters. So when he asked that question, and he wrote it for you, there's a moment, I don't know if anybody catches this moment, there's a moment that in that scene where he looks at me and I do a little subtle, that's why you see the play. I did. So, you know, I feel there was some shame in Paul. That's why I come out and sing the guilty stain song. And there's shame, there's a sense of guilt that comes with this character. And with him not being able to be here to defend himself, you know.
And to add on to that just a little bit, I do believe that, he meant to discard him, but then once Z finds it, it's almost like now Paw recognizing that him and Z are very similar in the same way that this land is ours, respect it, and having attraction to men. It's now that he knows his secret, he becomes the protector of Z, and trying to usher him through this understanding of life that he's now embarked on.
Yeah, because I feel like at first there's shame, when I hear you say, there and a bag of mysteries.
Okay.
There's a bag of mysteries. There's shame with me in that moment. But as we go through it, it's kind of like, okay, there's no need to have this shame. Now I have to comfort him in order, because I feel like I've lived this before. I've lived it with his grandfather. Since I lived it, and I'm able to, reincarnate or shape shift back into this, physical realm, I have to do whatever I can to make sure that my presence is known, to let him know that I'm gonna be here with you through this whole time. I have to open your eye to what it really is.
There is indeed such a bond between the two of you that was just so strong, and you can see that. And one reason I had to ask that question is, when you take that moment, it's a struggle for you to decide. It's a definite decision. I am not going to reveal this. This is between me and Papa. This is secret, and it was just such a powerful moment.
I thought that's when he most loved his father, because he
protected his father.
He did not want to break his father's heart,
Okay.
though it would provide some kind of freedom to you, because you did not want to be together.
So
It was very much a moment of grace provided to the father. It really struck home for me, coming from a public family, that we didn't want to talk about the generations of gay children that were in the family. And so, this provided that opportunity for an acknowledgement of the reality, but it also gave him the opportunity to maintain the facade that he has lived with, that the family has lived with for so long.
Absolutely. So I want to ask a question out to the audience really, really quickly. What went through your mind during that moment of Daddy's father coming in? That whole moment of the turning of Daddy. What were you thinking? Because I was hearing all these remarks, and you always think of all the gasp and the remarks. And be honest, what was going through your head at that moment?
Typical. They tried to, flip the script when people get caught, but I feel like it was another thing of shame, guilt, and it was deeper than that, of course, but I expected it.
Wow. Okay. Anything? Yeah.
Cultural norms.
Cultural norms?
Yes, because all of them, like what is expected of the cultural norms.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like she said, when he was caught, it's like, let me flip back to the script that I've been given on how to act.
Yes. Okay. So do you think that was inherently him? And when he comes back to speak to him,
I think it started with their grandfathers. Because they probably behaved like that. And it was passed down through generations. This is how I'm supposed to act.
Well, all
In
those,
the stories.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I said all those atrocities that the Mitchell family are listed for having done, those are all historic events. Stone Mountain, Ku Klux Klan, that happened. the Leo Frank, which is on Broadway right now, in the play Parade, was about a mob in Atlanta pulling an innocent man out of jail and hanging him. And then the church that was burnt up, that Danny's father locked the door. All those things actually happened. All his family participated in all of those evil racist acts.
I thought that was a very
And it was
powerful moment in the play to hear those historical
Absolutely.
activities that kind of brought you into the reality. So, you know, I'm enjoying this fiction. Then all of a sudden, you know, I have this nonfiction occurrence kind of arrive. All of a sudden, story like, wait a minute, I know Stone Mountain is. Wait a minute. Yeah, so now it gets really scary.
So I thought about privilege and fragility with that moment, that there was a fear of this being put upon the gentleman here, and so you're going to project it back to other. And so I thought about privilege and that this is there's no way that I'm going to let this shame or this thing visit upon me. I'm going to make sure it visits back on someone else.
And it sort of honestly broke my heart, because in really the beginning of the play, I felt that the way that they openly talked about what the parents did, what his father did. I said, oh my God, it's such a new generation. They're able to talk about it, and they're sitting here to have this conversation. And then it broke my heart. And then,
And then the play progresses.
As the play progresses, but I'll still say, but it is still, he opens it in a way that shows the progression of where we are today, even though we still have that. Yes.
I just think his character embodied the idea of fear. Racism is fear, and he reverted back to that whole thing. I'm getting caught, and he gets fearful, and then he reacts and starts to abuse. So it's all about fear, and his whole character embodied that. His family was a racist family.
Yeah.
He's afraid and shameful of how he feels towards.
And he's young, right?
And he's young,
Yeah.
and so he's fearful. He doesn't want his father to know who he is, and so it's all about fear, and that's what his character embodied. So it's just a different perception of.
And then even with him, like the question, because he has that monologue, was like, do I have the right to kill someone just because I'm afraid of it?
Oh, it's so powerful.
That was to me the prevailing theme of the whole play was fear. And I always think about fear as the opposite of love, but my heart was broken too, because I didn't think anyone loved one another. Because you can't fear what you love, and you can't love what you fear. And even the father, he had deep fear for his son, and so he wasn't allowed to love him because he was so afraid. And the whole play to me was heartbreaking, because the only love I saw was the love between the father and the mother who was gone. And so it was just unrequited love over and over and over again. And the other part that was heartbreaking was the lack of freedom. To your point, I'm thinking, okay, they're gonna get it together. Like this is the young generation, and the freedom to me is the highest ideal after love. And both those things could not be realized in this play.
I agree with that. With that scene, it was fear, and it was very frightening, because I actually lived that scene. Partner about 15 years ago, I was with a white guy, and I was with his home. The love that we had for one another. I stayed the night with him. He told me that about his father. His father was prejudiced. And I ended up staying, and I snuck in the home. He snuck me in the home with him. And we ended up falling asleep in his bed. So when his father came in the room, and both of us was really startled about that. It was very frightening about that, because he mentioned the word, he said the word, he's like, get that nigga out of my house. And I was scared for my life. I didn't know what was gonna happen. He's like, get him out of my house before I go get my gun. So I had to hurry up and get up out of that house. But the thing was, the partner that I was with, he stood up for me. but the meantime, he ended up getting kicked out of college, but he stood up for being out of college.
That's a good segue for me to come back to what I presented to you brothers and sisters here. Is that, are there elements of the story that you feel, and I'm not really on, if you speak to them, that really reflect the constituencies and the communities that you serve now?
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, I think about the young trans woman that was killed at Woodward and 6 Mile just 3 weeks ago. And you know, probably a reaction to someone, you know, feeling that sense of guilt or humiliation or whatever you know a straight guy feels. So the work that we do at Equality Michigan is, you know, to be a victim's advocate, to be there, to be supportive, to help folks through the legal process that ensues, to pass civil rights laws that are actually inclusive and representative of our community, which, you know, only happened in March of this year.
Right.
So, you know, for my entire lifetime, all of our entire lifetimes, it was perfectly legitimate and legal to be denied housing, fired from a job, simply for, you know, your sexual identity, your gender identity. So, you know, that is the work that we do, and you know, we're now taking on a fight against conversion therapy, which is again, you know, kind of something that stigmatizes and it is, you know, about making certain people feel powerful in my mind. But it's a fight worth taking. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Anything, I know you mentioned